look, it shouldn't just be a program to give people money. It has to become a job-generating machinery. It has to become a program for employing people or for creating jobs, in the sense that not just giving people money, but giving people an education in an area that is lacking in the oil and gas industry, where we're still bringing a lot of people from outside the country to come and take jobs for welding, for joinery, for diving and so on, because we don't have the skills. But if we can turn the amnesty program into the kind of mechanism that generates training and then jobs for people, it becomes a more sustainable program rather than generating money. And more importantly, there are issues around, there are also the demand for asking for blocks to be allocated to the Niger Delta. It may not be directly allocated to people. Perhaps it could be allocated to states, it could be allocated to companies that have equity meted out to various, shared out to various communities, and then you have individuals from those communities actually engaged in providing various services to the development of those blocks. You know, that's how you create a mechanism that is more sustainable. So I think that's something that needs to be advised. So some of those programs, we can actually sit down and review the process a lot better and see how we can turn it into something more sustainable.
Dolapo, some analysts say that one low-hanging fruit that can be, you know, to be used at this time to execute and keep the militants off the pipelines will be for them to have security, surveillance and protection of oil and gas infrastructure. That was one of the points they raised as part of their 16-point demand. They want to be the ones to police those pipelines. And so maybe if they do police the pipelines, they can be more responsible for it and keep the militants off.
Okay, I mean, I'm kind of ambivalent on that, because, to be sincere, part of why the disruptions last year were very successful is because, to some extent, it's people behind the pipeline protection as well.
So if you have the people who are supposed to be protecting the pipelines there, they should be able to keep the militants off.
Well, I mean, NNPC is also thinking of a protection force. So I imagine to some extent they will draw some of the personnel for that from the Niger Delta. So it could be one way to go around this. But what you want, more importantly, is assurances that, look, it's not that tomorrow, if there's any small grievance, these same people will be used to destroy these pipelines. And I think that's the key worry around that. But to some extent, yes, we need more security and more surveillance of the pipelines.
So another question would be, do you think that this present administration will be able to attain all of this, to be able to meet all the 6-point demand from the Niger Delta, or they can start it and it should be a continuum even after this administration maybe rounds up or even continues a second term?
Exactly. Look, I don't think they can meet all 16 demands, but I think they can start. And for me, the most important thing is the engagement. Look, engage with the region. Engage with the region, start to provide the critical infrastructure. That's the key demand. The roads, the hospitals, the bridges. There are parts of the Niger Delta that even a small bridge would make a significant difference in the distance people have to travel so that they can get to school or get to hospital, to the nearest hospital. So smaller things like that, let's start working on them, those critical infrastructure. Let's put a program for engagement to turn the amnesty program into a job generating machine. Let's start to put in place machineries or trust to ensure that communities have a stake in oil blocks or in oil fields. You know, let's start to put those structures in place. We may not meet all in this regime, but the engagement will ensure that the people feel carried along and they feel there's absolutely no need to resort to disrupting production so that they can get the government to notice their demands.
But apart from the stakeholders, you also need to get the confidence of the investors in that particular region. So we have the international oil companies who have been asked to relocate, and you talked about that already. But what do you think this meeting is going to be like for them? Because they're also going to be part of the delegation.
Yeah, I think to some extent the IOCs are quite aware of these issues. Look, they've been trying various methods to try and resolve and avoid these issues. But one thing I will say is that, look, this deal is very critical to, the outlook for the country for this year. It's important that we get this peace deal, because if we can get the oil production back up to where it should be, we would have a significant boost to revenue, because we have higher oil prices, and the likelihood of being able to, sell more at a higher price will be fantastic for the country in terms of dollar earnings and all, and easing the FX challenge in the country and so on. So there are so many implications of having a peace deal. And then again, you're also using it. It could also go a long way to also assuage the investors so that they can start developing their JV blocks. They can start investing. The FG wants to run a licensing round later this year. That we're going to be roadshows in US and UK to boost those licensing rounds. A peace deal will be very critical to the success of all this. The refineries want to go to 60% capacity. A peace deal will be critical to getting oil to the refineries as well. So I think there's a lot riding on the meeting, and to some extent, both the government and the militants are aware of this. So I think both parties have to come with a listening ear, and that's very key from the government side of things. First of all, the listening ear, hear all the demands, and then provide real practical steps that, okay, this is what we can start to do now based on the revenue situation or based on how we are. This is all we can start to do now. We'll start with this and then gradually keep on building on that and sustain the engagement that ensures that there will be some measure of peace.
So for you talked about funding options. Where would the funds come from to drive these particular programs and drive these particular points? Still from the oil and gas sector?
Well, definitely from the oil and gas sector. I mean, it's still going to be from the oil and gas sector. To some extent, of course, the government as well too. And what we're talking about here are Naira funds, really, and we're not talking FX. So to some extent, I don't think there will be a significant challenge in providing that level of funding for the projects that need to be done. But it's a case of phasing it out because you can't do it all at once. So phase out, this is what we can realistically do now with the level of funds we have. Let's try and start this and create a mechanism to ensure that these things are actually being done so that people can see that, oh, they've apportioned a contract for the development or the completion of the East-West Road, and we can see that the East-West Road is actually completed. There's a fund being developed to ensure that the railways to link the Niger Delta to Lagos is being developed. Then we can actually track and see that, oh, the railway project has started and it's being done month by month. We can see progress and so on. So those things are critical so that people feel carried along and the engagement is sustained.
Well, Dolapo, the truth is everybody needs to give peace a chance, and peace at last needs to come to that region. But we always appreciate your insights. Thank you for your time this morning. Well, Business Morning continues in just a moment. Stay with us.